Hello, we will finish up the 17th century lectures as part D, Baroque women, and I can tell you the women show a lot more sense in this period than the men do. Let's begin. Women's wear. Let's see what they were doing. Guess what? They were not as nearly as ostentatious as the men, but they were. We have a whisk collar here, very wide, introduced by Louis XIV's mother, rounded, very wide whisk collar around a rounded neckline. A small stomacher right here, right, a tab, and then the modeste secret combo. This is an interesting costume in the mid-century, the widow's habit. Again, I think Louis XIV's mother made this popular, mourning her husband. A sleeveless black cloak topped with a not weird, it is a little weird, wired black hood of sheer fabric called a conch, like the shell. Women's fashion follows men to some extent. You can see here maybe some gallants decorating the edge of a bodice. There, the ribbon loops. The sleeves stop at the elbow, and the puffed out shirt with gallants there. An overskirt lengthened to include a short train and a bateau neckline. You will see this again. Very popular, the bateau neckline, which is this stiff piece of fabric. We'll start here in Louis XIV's reign, and we'll continue for some time, even well into the 20th century. By 1660s, the fichu had become a sheer piece of linen attached to or tucked into the neckline and decorated with ribbon roses. Engageants, lace ruffles, multiple lace ruffles were added to the chemise cuff. You can see here. Again, here's the fichu becoming a lace edging attached to the edge of the bodice, almost like a bateau neckline, but it's scalloped, so we'll just keep calling it fichu. Multiple engageants added to the chemise sleeve. The train of the overskirt, here we see this modeste, is tied back to show even more of the secret. You can see here the secret with multiple flounce, which we'll talk about later, tied with a bow in the back in a ladder configuration, which we'll talk about in a moment. A radical change about the time in the 1670s when Louis was kind of getting older, I think in his 40s, 50s, and finding religion, women's fashion underwent a radical change too. This is a new type again it started in Spain and it just caught fire across Europe. This is the manteau. The bodice and the skirt are cut from one piece, overskirt I should say, one piece from shoulder to hem. You can see here. Whoops, where's my little, there we go. This could be a belt sewn on, but really one piece, and it's tied back there. And then this is actually the manteau. I said the secret or modeste. Pardon me. This is the manteau. The overskirt. The jupe is the underskirt of the same usually of the same fabric. So you can see it's more modest. It's got the lace engageants coming out of the elbow length sleeves with gloves. But it is tied back, and you see the same underskirt underneath. Very popular from Spain. Stop at the elbow, belted, I just said that, usually made of heavy satin. The jupe was either matching fabric or silk in contrasting color. A popular lace was winter lace, a black lace on the underskirt of the embroidery. Sort of this stuff here. Now, the reason this was revolutionary is because, as you can see, it's got tied with a belt, but that means the corset becomes more visible, which is fine. That means, though, it becomes a decorative object, so it's fronted with decorated fabric and backed with whalebone, sometimes with a stomacher. You can see here, right, a stomacher attached, but it's more decorative. You're seeing it more and more, so you have to decorate that thing up. The rear of the manteau became more elaborate. A pad was often added to create a kind of primitive bustle. Elaborately arranged train. The longer the train, the higher in status you were. So a very fashionable manteau there. More terms? Sure, I got more terms. We talked about the ladder configuration. As it reached French, it was known as échelle, which is this style of series of ribbons attached to the stomacher, going up, 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 towards the décolletage. In the 1690s, Louis is getting older. His second wife, Madame de Maintenon, was very religious, and she was having none of it. Girls, get that décolletage up. Dark, heavy fabrics. Lappets. We talked about lappets. Here's some lappets for you. Big old lappets. There. A fichu was inset into the corset to cover the cleavage, so you can't see it. Kids were tied to leashes, as they should be. So accessories. Many men's hats were based on the Puritan tall crown hat. They were Puritans, but it was attractive. Decorated with plumes, ostrich feathers, kind of panache. At the end of the century, you see a very popular felt cap known as the bicorn, because it has two horns, one on either side of the head. Fashionable, looks good, and keeps rain off. Men's hair, long, very long, curled into ringlets. Lots of styling, took a long time, so this led many men to shave their head and say, I'm not dealing with that, we're just going to wear wigs. So wigs become very popular. And the most popular was the periwig, a high wig with a deep part. Another variation of the periwig is to frizz and powder it. And because of that, men would wear silk caps at night to keep their heads warm. Chief accessory of men was a walking cane, of course, decorative swords called small swords, worn in those scabbards, and the most popular men's shoe at the time, very characteristic of this period, was a low shoe with a high, thick heel, called a Louis XIV heel, because it was red. Kind of like Christian Louboutins, right? The high heels that are known for their red soles. This is how you know a Louis XIV heel. It is distinctively red. Women, hair cut into a variety of ringlets, long curls that would hang down all sides of the face, called heartbreakers, because they were so beautiful they would just break your heart. Now, we talked about the manteau and how influential it was. Let's talk about that headdress. It is called the fontange, a series of stiff lace held together with wire, worn with a scoff, or you can see on the far right attached lappets. They still wore pattens, men and women both, to protect your shoes. A very common shoe for a woman was a backless mule called the pantoufle. To this day, we use the term clocking. Women's hose at the time had an embroidery design on the outside called clocking. And then it wasn't uncommon for both men and women to wear one or more dark beauty patches. So you can see here, she's got a little beauty mark there and one here. They're just small pieces of fabric, usually taffeta or silk, and you coat them in plaster and plaster them to your face. Some quick examples, of course, Louis XIV here in all his regal splendor, who made all this happen. Thank you, Louis. I put the New World here because it had some excellent costumes you can see, combining working class and some aristocracy, like what's his name there, Irish guy, with his little kind of epaulettes or gallants. You can see how the shoulder, how the separate sleeves interact with the doublets on this one run by Christian Bale. Here's a nice Puritan woman. She's wearing a partlet there. There is Pocahontas in a corset and a chemise with attached sleeves. Of course, the Three Musketeers, you got to talk about them. They're all over the place. Look at the boot hose here on Richard Chamberlain playing one of them, I don't know. Very characteristics. Quatrefoil straps down here. Slashed doublet. So, all sorts of versions. There's the Man in the Iron Mask there. You can see the older Lucier Musketeers with, supposed to be, I think, a Louis XIII. I can't remember the plot. I beg pardon. And then the facial hair, you can see the long hair, and on Jeremy Irons, the Van Dyke beard. Here is a costume rendering of Louis XIV or Louis XIII, I think, in that. Cyrano de Bergerac, even though it was written in the 19th century, was, of course, about the Cavalier period with appropriate decor. Also, just real quickly, a standard character of English comedy called the fop, from an old English fop, meaning a foolish and vain person. So these people who were slavishly and obsessively devoted to the latest fashion. So obviously a fop's habit was to be ridiculed as a mismatch of different styles and often ludicrously extravagant. Colley Cibber a very famous 18th century actor, renowned actor and manager, theater manager, was renowned for his fops, such as Lord Foppington in The Relapse here, taking a pinch of snuff, don't you know? And of course, Restoration comedy plays on all those Baroque elements there. Usually, you can see men in just laughable get-ups. And of course, Moliere. You can see this is a good one on the left there, where it has a justicore with long waistcoats as well. So you can see that sort of toned down slide itself. To tone down fashion itself. And that's it. We're done with the 17th century. We have finished it out. We'll catch a little bit of the 17th century when we slide into the Rococo period of the 18th century, but for all practical purpose, we can leave this behind. Thank you for listening.